Hello there and welcome to this Toto community webinar. This session will be a demonstration of Lambda Solutions reporting and analytics solutions that gives your stakeholders access to the right data when they need it and in the right format. So the solution, powered by Zudo Analytics, extends the reporting capability of Toto Learn to measure learner engagement through the KPIs that matter to your organization. So I'm really pleased to introduce Ben Young, Director of Learning Solutions at Lambda, who's going to lead this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Ben will be answering these at the end of the webinar, but I'll also try and answer any if I can. This session is going to be recorded and it will be available in the Toto community after the session. So please do come there and look at the webinar afterwards as well. So thanks very much, and over to you, Ben.
Thank you for that great introduction. And thank you everyone for joining. So this is just a peek at our agenda today. So we're going to be touching a little bit on what is learning analytics, touching upon engagement, common challenges that people are facing with looking at analytics and engagement in their learning management system, some ways to approach your learning management data, and some common KPIs that we've seen people use for engagement, and then some tips to measure success. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll be going through all those different scenarios. Just some objectives for today. You should be able to have some ideas on how you can monitor learner progress, also to be able to report on learner engagement. We're going to be looking at a little bit on assessing time spent by learners and instructors in the system and ways of visualizing that data. And this will help you analyze, trends in the effectiveness of your learning. So what is learning engagement? Instructional elements that are, similar, whether they're high tech or whether they're, low tech, they all kind of factor into learning engagement. Learners need to feel that they're active, that they're engaged, and that they're, things that they're working towards. Learners need to feel that they're able to grow towards results, and that everything they're working towards is leading towards growth and progress. Some common approaches to fostering learning engagement, for example, are social learning. In Twitter, you'll find that there's things like forums, wikis, shared glossaries, taking, self-paced learning approaches. This is also sometimes known as just-in-time learning. So a lot of times that's seen through various online learning resources. Micro-learning is becoming a really good kind of approach to helping build engagement or keeping people engaged. This is usually focusing on pieces of content that's around 3 to 5 minutes. And applied learning. So for example, people will be going to labs, workshops, and this actually allows them to take some of the knowledge they've learned in the learning management system and applying that to some of the skills and concepts that they've learned, and actually doing that in more of a real-time environment. So all of this kind of translates to a lot of scenarios into quality matters. The quality of the content and the instructional design elements applied can have a big impact on the learner's experience. Some signs of engagement: attendance, submitting work. For example, in Toto, this could be assignment submissions, quiz submissions, SCORM attempts. When it comes to social activities, examples could be forum discussions. Discussions started, posts, replies, glossary submissions, when we're kind of going back to that example, and also touching upon views. So how many times has the course been viewed? How many times has learning resources and activities been viewed? And feedback, survey results. So all of that kind of builds into some things around learning engagement and how that can be looked at. So what is learning analytics? Just to provide a little bit of a background here on that, learning analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners. It's the process of using data generated through the LMS to gain more insights of users' experiences. Thinking back to traditional classrooms, there's a lot of interactions that are going on between instructors, between students, and the same is true in the learning learning management system, in that platform. There's a lot of interactions that are happening, and all of that is captured. It's stored there in the background in the database. So some insights gained from learning data analysis can definitely identify the effectiveness of your platform at delivering learning material. Now that we've taken a look at what learning engagement is and what analysis looks like, and I think it's a good opportunity here for us to look at some common challenges. So some common challenges that we've seen is that technology kind of factors into that. As we've seen, reporting using learning analytics has a number of different components which all require their own expertise. And there might be a variety of systems in play that all need to talk to each other and communicate to each other for this data to be processed effectively and made available. So the reporting piece itself can be a challenge sometimes. We've seen this in organizations where they might be using the learning management system, Totara, for example, and they might have another system where they need to have the data living side by side. So a reporting solution that's very robust might allow you to connect into both sources of data and report on both solutions. A common example I see is Totara and also Salesforce, and having both those worlds of data living side by side together. Another common challenge is the data. Getting complete access to all the data contained in your system can be challenging. Often there are limited sets or collections of information that are provided, so sometimes that's a big challenge for organizations. And another challenge that we found is the skill. We've found often that the biggest hurdle that organizations come across, and what can sometimes prevent organizations from implementing any kind of data and analytics system, is the lack of necessary skill. Companies are often afraid to invest in reporting because if the few people who have the necessary skills leave the organization, they don't have the resources to use the analytics solutions. So that sometimes is a big challenge there. So let's take a look at approaching your data. And since we have a fairly good kind of background now on a little bit of the learning analytics side of things, we can kind of look at how to approach your data. And we'll break this down to some common important steps required to gather specific information. These can be explained through some simple why, what, and how statements. So I'll be covering that in the next couple slides on using that kind of scenario that's set up there. And we'll go through that. Looking at approaching your data, understanding these common cases for collecting this information can sometimes lead to steps that are overlooked with you wanting to get straight into like the juicy information. So understanding the purpose of data extraction and that process, or even the specific information you're looking to gather, is a great place to begin. So I usually recommend starting with a strategy or objective. Identifying what you want to know at a high level and for what purpose. With all the data that is generated by your learning management system, it's easy to get overwhelmed and lost in the data. If you have access to pretty much any of the information there, it's hard to know where to start. So instead, I recommend that you start by looking at what your organization needs in terms of business goals and objectives, and then start to align that to some of the perhaps KPIs that you can start to get out of your learning management system. To use an example, your organization may have a number of staff that have taken a first aid certification program, which is managed through your learning management system. These certifications typically remain valid for a number of years, but the individuals will need to recertify at some point, for example, in the future. It's vital that staff remain certified and know who is certified is an important first step. If they're not certified, it's important to know who's in progress and where they are in that progress. If anybody's struggling, if they need further assistance, for example. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to be looking at and kind of bringing back to this example to carry on with some specific KPIs that we can pull out for this certification scenario. So we've taken a look at our objective. We've looked at the what now, what data is best to provide the information we are looking for. So let's kind of touch upon some KPIs or key performance index indicators. They're often measurable values that can demonstrate how effective a company is at achieving key business objectives. KPIs can come in many numbers or different forms or contexts within the platform, such as logins or responses to questions or course views. Here are some common KPIs. The data sets include course completions, grades, activity scores. Any piece of information that's captured through the LMS can potentially be used as a performance metric. Going back to that first aid example, that certification that we were using earlier, using the certification completions, due dates, expiry dates, and course progress would be useful to gauge where the user is at within the program and what their rate is of progress. Any organizational goal may be, an organizational goal, for example, might be to reduce injuries in the workplace. And, being able to track KPIs towards that when it comes to the learning management system is really important. So if the organization is trying to, overall, their objective is to reduce injuries in the workplace, their KPIs that help support that in the learning environment might be that 90% of staff have to complete first aid training and 100% of staff have to complete safety awareness training. So those are just kind of like some KPI goals that can, at a high level, align to an organization's overall goals and objectives that might be part of their business plan. Identifying these key metrics as described is some of those kind of requirements that'll help you move forward with implementing and developing reports themselves. And that's what we'll be looking at on our next couple slides. So following with the, the trend, the question of, how to kind of like do this, project of reporting, we can kind of move that into our next kind of look here, the how. And once we've identified the business objectives and KPIs, we then need to decide on how to access this data. The first aspect of this is identifying the application or the tool that will allow you to perform learning analysis. This function could be built into your LMS platform directly or via a third-party application. Third-party tools could be, purposely built with learning analytics in mind, or they could be more general and used across a variety of different platforms or data sets. Totally offers users a good set of reports as well as report sources. And Zula Analytics is a solution specifically designed to enhance the reporting capabilities of Totally Learn. Zula Analytics clients, for example, have the capability to report on any of the data stored in the Totally Learn database, every piece, every field, every row. Zula clients also have the ability to use tools to modify existing reports or build new reports through the interface using drag and drop technology. So we do provide you a number of the reports out of the box. Any of those reports could be seen as templates, and you can modify them, change them, save them as new reports, and it's all done through a drag and drop interface. And as mentioned, you do have access to all the data stored in your database. And if you have plugins or some customizations that have added new database tables to Totally Learn, it is possible to get at those tables of information, which is often really important for organizations. So in addition to that, we support a large number of graphs and charts that could be used to help visualize the information and share that with others. So some techniques for implementing learning analytics. In this section, we'll go over a few of the different techniques that we can kind of look at to help support implementing learning analytics and reporting in an organization. So approaching your data through chunks of time to get useful information to analyze things by weeks, months, semesters, terms, quarters, or even years is a recommendation. This allows you to properly assess incremental advances in analytics. So for example, if your company runs quarterly reporting, you might want to run reports every half quarter in order to assess essentially incremental advantages or incremental advances. If you're running on a quarterly scenario, you'll want to be able to check in at maybe that halfway point and see your progress towards achieving certain goals, certain objectives. This gives you time to change or modify things that are going on to help you get to a goal if you see that you're not going to reach it. So it's important to look at what is your organization's chunks of time you're going through, or what is your time frame for how your organization's working. This other section here, what we recommend is making a plan to essentially look at the data and have ongoing processes that tie back to running reports on a frequent basis to keep the information relevant. This also allows you to see trends clearly and gain better insights. Looking upon this slide here, we do have some examples of some graphs and charts that are shown on this page. Just gives you some high-level information of how things could be visualized. Graphs and charts do apply and play a really huge role with learning analytics due to their inherent ability to simplify complex information to something visual to display that information. If you're able to take something complex and break it down to charts and graphs, it usually helps simplify that information so it's easier for people to understand. And that provides that high-level snapshot of a particular data set. And this is an effective tool when discussing the outcomes and trends identified through the learning data analysis process. Reporting solutions typically include a library of out-of-the-box reports and chart types, giving you large control over the look and feel of your reports. So that's something to keep in mind when looking at learning analytics and how you're approaching it as an organization. Zula clients, as mentioned here, are able to use the library of charts types to give you control over the way your reports look and how they feel. And one of the other things we like to point out is being able to share and communicate that data. So a key component of getting people to use reports is actually making it so they're accessible to people and easy to view. Many traditional reporting solutions would require exporting of the data to Excel, and people are starting to look at it there. This becomes a barrier. A modern approach to making reports easy to share through the LMS or through the desktop or handheld devices is taken with Zula. And you can also automate the reports and schedule those so it's possible to email them and have them come to you. And as a final point, this is usually the most important point and is sometimes easy to forget, is reflection. This is the ultimate goal of reporting solutions and really what it all comes down to. And discussing the data, seeing the trends, and understanding the meaning of information is the goal of the entire process. So sitting down with your coworkers, your boss, managers, and looking at the data, discussing what it means, understanding what it means is an important step. And this step is one that starts to bring about the actual change and improvements based on the information that was collected and reported on. So this is a really important factor. And I usually recommend trying to build this into regular planned meetings. If you don't schedule it, it usually won't happen. So let's look at some tips to measuring learning success and engagement. So this is an instructor dashboard, and I'll show you the live version of it, and we'll kind of go into it. But what we're looking at here is something that helps instructors monitor things such as enrollment start dates, enrollment due dates, assignment completions, course activities, and measurements of students' progress. This also provides an opportunity to look at intervention points. For example, people who haven't logged in, people who haven't started courses. So it's often important to kind of look at that. So this is the screenshotted version. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move you into our Totara Learn site here. So you can actually take a quick peek of the actual real data. And I've logged in, taken the liberty of doing that. I've logged in here as an administrator. I'm just going to go to full kind of screen mode here so you get a good viewing point. And this is our Totara Learn site. We're definitely utilizing the dashboard feature of Totara Learn to be able to put reports right on the dashboard for administrators. So we've actually set up different reports, different dashboards for different groups. So for example, we have an instructor dashboard here, an executive dashboard, and we just loaded some reports on those. So Totara, with its dashboard capabilities, lends itself really nicely to be able to share reports with your different audiences of users. If you have executives logging in, they might only care about their executive dashboard. If you have instructors logging in, they might only care about the instructor dashboard. So let's go to that and look at how that's kind of put together. This is just a dashboard that I've set up to kind of show these courses that they might be an instructor in. And a little bit further down here, we have our actual instructor dashboard loading. And what Zula does is it takes a look at the information, puts the number crunching together, presents the information, actually doesn't store any of the actual data. So all of it's kind of tapping into live data, live results there. And we've added a filter here that allows for the instructor to actually go through and filter based on the courses he or she has access to. So that's something else to keep in mind, is that you can actually secure the data. So when you're an instructor, you only see the courses that you're involved in. When you're a student, you only see the courses you're involved in. If you're a manager, you only see your team that you're overseeing. But what we're going to do here is we're just going to apply this report. It's just going to refactor all of the information here. And at a very high level, this instructor is able to see, for example, enrollments, how many are active, completion progress, and grades. We get a visualization of that down here. We have opportunity for intervention right here. We can see that there's a certain number of learners who haven't logged in and accessed the system or have ever accessed this particular course in a certain amount of time. What we can do with this particular list is follow up with them. We can download this to Excel or a CSV and then start to follow up those people. On this dashboard too, it's nice that we have a visualization here of when people are accessing the particular course, and we can see when the most popular times are. So I just wanted to show an example of what Zula looks like in a Totara site to give you some context here to some of the things we're talking about. So I'm just going to bring us back here to some of the other things we have on our slides. Some other things that might be really interesting is engagement metrics. And some of the engagement metrics here, as we're kind of looking at, could be number of logins, they could be number of visits to a course, form posts, activity submissions, the accumulated time spent. So we have a report here that's just showing the example of that. And you can see here, based on these statistics and these KPIs, that we're able to kind of track the most popular or most engaging courses in our site. Something that's important to keep in mind is that these are stats that we thought are relevant to, things that we're working with. So for example, we're showing form posts right here on this report. Some organizations are using forms, some organizations may not be using forms. So what some organizations might do if they're not using forms is switch that out for maybe chat time or assignment submissions or quiz submissions or SCORM views. It's all about trying to find the KPIs that matter. And if you have a solution that allows you to change and modify the reports, it's possible to do that. And you would just change out the report KPI for something that's more relevant for your organization. Time spent learning is an important factor. I like time spent learning quite a bit, and it's become quite a popular discussion point. On this report, we're able to see the amount of time that somebody has spent in the specific course here. So we can see the accumulation time. We can actually see a breakdown by activity. And overall, we see at the very bottom there, the amount of time that they spent by month across all the courses. So this gives us some useful information. As an instructor, you can see and verify if somebody said that they spent, an hour in their quiz, and you see that they've only spent around 1 minute and 3 seconds. That tells a different story. On a kind of more an instructional design approach, you're able to see things like, for example, if you've designed a piece of content to last, let's say 30 minutes, and people are only spending 2 minutes in it, that's a good indication that your content is not engaging and it needs to be reworked. In this example, if on the flip side of things, we've spent a lot of time making sure that our SCORM activity here is only 3 minutes in length, and people are spending on average 12 minutes in it. That could be an indication that the content is really complex and it's taking them a while to go through it and maybe reviewing it multiple times. So the time spent learning piece is quite interesting for organizations. It can tie into some kind of direct compliance types of reports. This one is just a visualization here of learning effectiveness indicators. So there is a feedback survey that allows you to provide a survey to learners at the end of a course, and you're able to collect some information on how well people are actually rating your course. So we have an example here of what a chart could be set up to look like. We have our courses running around on the vertical axis. We have our questions on the horizontal axis, things like, would you recommend this course? Was the content easy to understand? And we can see a heat map here visualizing that information. Green leading more towards the rating of a 5, red indicating more of a rating of a 0. So we can see here that the health and safety 2016 course was rated fairly well in comparison to perhaps some of the other courses here of workplace bullying, which was rated a little bit lower. So this is a good way of visualizing information across the site for a feedback survey. Some other kinds of things that you can do with this is question analysis. So you can bring up a report showing you how many times a quiz question has been attempted, how many times it's been graded correctly, how many times it's been graded incorrectly. So this can help you identify problematic questions. Other popular ways that I've seen this used is with pre and post tests, being able to compare the score of somebody before they've gone through the content and then being able to compare the score after they've gone through the content is really, really valuable. For this visualization here, this is an example of a compliance dashboard for training and compliance. And I actually have a live example of that. So I'm just going to quickly switch over to our visualization of this. I've opened up this report beforehand, so I didn't have to have kind of like navigating to this report and time taken from that. This report allows who's viewing the report to filter by different organizations, and this is tying into Toter's organization and position structure. We're able to select the course we want to report on, then we're able to visualize the information here. So we're able to see completions versus how many staff are assigned to that organization and the percentage of completions by organization. So this is helping somebody see that there's compliance by department. The information is something that we can interact with. So the reports are something that if you hover over the data points, will show you the information. If I wanted to, I could actually zoom into specific areas to take a closer look. So it's interactive reporting, which is quite nice. And we do have a breakdown here of what those reports are kind of leading to, what those graphs are leading to. So for example, we can see our cardiology department, and we can see the various positions that are involved there. So we can see there's nurses, and we can see the completion and the breakdown there. So it's quite nice to be able to see that and filter into it. Bringing us back to our presentation here. Just to wrap up with some takeaways, start with the strategy. Using KPIs that align to your company goals is important. So for example, going back to decreasing injuries in the workplace and accidents that might align to people completing safety courses. Approach your data through chunks of time, using charts to simplify the information and get high-level snapshots of the data sets, and build reviews and discussions into your process to look at the trends and discuss strategies on how to move forward and improve. Thank you, everyone. I'll pass it back to our hosts who can wrap things up here for us.
Thanks, Ben. Just a couple of little questions from the chat at the moment. And if anyone else has any other questions for Ben, feel free to post them in the chat now. So Caleb was asking some good questions. So for example, where information is calculated in Zula from Totara, can the calculated information be sent back to Totara so it can be used? Hi, Ben. Do you want me to repeat that one?
Sorry, I was just on mute there.
That's okay.
It happens pretty much guaranteed every webinar. So with the calculations, it does the calculations on the Zula side and it presents that information. So if you want, we're doing, for example, an average of all the grades in a course, it would have that information presented, but it wouldn't store that information. Zula doesn't usually generate net new information or store extra information on our side. So it doesn't have that. But every time you view that report, it'll be there, it'll be available. So in a sense, your calculations, the math and the equations that you put together to get to that are stored on the Zula side. So every time you view that report, you'll have that information available.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I know that you've shown this, but just to clarify for everyone again, can the Zula charts be embedded within a dashboard in Totara?
Yes, they can. Zula charts, they're presented and visualized to learners or users in your Totara site based on roles and permissions. And these charts are embedded in a special block that we have that you can install in your Totara site. So pretty much anywhere that a block is supported in Totara is possible to add a report or a link to a report. So for example, on the dashboard page, it's possible to have reports added to that. In a course, it's possible to have reports added to that. You can even add reports to areas where you're viewing, let's say, as a manager, your teams. So anywhere where there's a block, essentially you can add a report or a link to a report with Zula.
Okay, so just to clarify with using the information from the reports, so the idea for this one, if, for example, you take information out of Totara, like time and learning, for example, can you then use that information to generate open badges, for example, in Totara Learn? Can you take the information that you've generated and use it on other features in the system?
That is actually an interesting one. I think there's probably a couple components to that. With the time spent learning piece, that is another kind of plugin that we have that's installed with what we usually refer to as the Zula plugin set. So it's a series of plugins that provide the visualization of the reports, single sign-on to Zula itself. One of those pieces is the time spent learning. We wanted to get a good snapshot of what was going on in a Totara site. So there is essentially a plugin that's installed that adds a kind of like a time log table in Totara, and it adds to that log. The information is stored in your Totara database, so that's where the information is held on that side. And this plugin just essentially has an extra record or information logged of the learner. So since it is stored on the Totara database side, in theory, if somebody were to do some extensions or adding to the capabilities of the badges, they could potentially tap into this extra information that's stored there and release a badge based on the amount of time that's accumulated. Something that we've done is added another restriction access plugin, so you can actually restrict access to a learning activity based on the amount of accumulated time that a learner spent in a course. So if you wanted to lock down access to a certificate or maybe a final exam based on a learner spending an hour in the course, you could do things like that. But tying back to the badge idea, some of the information's there, it would just have to be utilized, and that might lead to a custom either feature or custom development in some kind of way.
Okay, thank you. Some people are asking about other tools. So for example, like IntelliBoard, how would you compare the usability of Zula to other analytics solutions, such as IntelliBoard?
We do come across IntelliBoard quite a bit, and we do have a bit of a different approach with what we do. I think some of the big things that differentiate us is the ability to get at all of the data in an easy fashion. you're able to put what we refer to as data sources together, which is just looking at the Totara database, putting all that information together, and then providing that. So I think that's one of the big differentiators. I haven't seen IntelliBoard for a while, so I can't go into the specifics of what they have or what they don't have. But I know that's one of the things I've seen from a while back. When it comes to general BI solutions, let's say if you're looking at any of like the popular ones out there, not to mention their names, a lot of times those are robust reporting solutions that are intended to report on, data from a lot of different areas. They give you the tools to build those reports, but you're building everything from scratch. With Zula, for example, we've built a lot of functionality into Zula to take into account things like the roles and permissions, the organization and position structure that exist within Totara, so you can actually leverage that when reporting. And one of the big things too is we have the ability to embed and visualize the reports right in Totara Learn. So when your learners log in or your users log in, that's where they can get their reports. It's easy for them to see the data right there in the environment they're used to going to.
Great, thanks, Ben. So what does the future of Zuna Analytics look like? What do you think is going to be happening the next year or so? Anything changing?
Well, we definitely want to improve Zula Analytics with every chance we get, and a lot of our improvements are driven by feedback by the users of Zula Analytics. So, for example, we've had a lot of requests around time spent learning, and that's what led us into providing some of those great features there. There has been a lot of requests around trigger-based reporting. So we've started to develop some features that support that, and we currently have a good foundation of that already existing in the product now. So there might be some enhancements of that coming in the future. It'll be really interesting to kind of see how it evolves and where we can bring it. I think that there's opportunity to see perhaps us touching upon things like being able to easily maybe send messaging to users once we've identified users at risk. So things like that might be of a great interest.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Does anyone have any other further questions? Otherwise, we'll start to wrap up there for today. So is there any final reminders you'd like to give everyone, Ben, of why Zuna Analytics are very useful?
Well, it is a purpose-driven solution for Totara Learn. It allows you to embed those reports right within Totara, and it utilizes the roles, permissions, organization structure within Totara, and gives you full access to every piece of information stored in your Totara database for real-time ad hoc reporting.
Okay, thanks so much, Ben, and thank you for everyone for joining today. This session is going to be recorded and you can access it from the Totara community. So if you're not already a member of the Totara community, do go and create an account. So thanks very much, Ben, and thanks everyone for coming today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.